I'm glad you're sitting down because the next piece of information is shocking. Number one cause of diabetes is refined sugar. Did you know that there was no diabetes on the planet till sugar was well established? But something else has come along, and you will find that most of these foods are made out of it. It's the hybridized wheat. The hybridized wheat, how could that be? In the 1950s, wheat went through intensive crossbreeding. You see, they wanted to produce a plant with a high yield of grain to help with the starvation crisis in Africa, in India, in Mexico. And they they created one. 1969, Dr. Norman Bourlag got a Nobel Prize for his hybridized wheat. 1970, notice the time frame, 1970, this wheat went worldwide. So by the 1990s, every cereal, bread, cake, pie, pizza, pasta, what's it made out of? The hybridized wheat. But what was never addressed was the effect of that hybridized wheat on the gut. So what I want to show you now is what it did to the starch. That's where it's particularly pertinent in the area of diabetes. And as you'll see, heart disease. So amylopectin A is the name of the starch that was created in the hybridization process. And amylopectin A gets the blood sugar level up very high, very fast, and then a corresponding low. Let me give you something to compare it with. Amylopectin B is found in bananas and potatoes, and if you're familiar with bananas and potatoes on the glycemic index, they're fairly high. So the bananas and the potatoes, the amylopectin B, it's not as quick, not as high, not as fast. You see that? Actually not as low either, so we'll go up about there. So that's your B and that's your A. Something else to compare it to is amylopectin C. Amylopectin C is found in legumes. That's chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans. That gives a nice steady rise, maintains a nice steady deliverance, and then a nice steady drop. What does every cell in our body want? It wants a steady delivery of fuel. Understanding what amylopectin A does, let me show you how this affects the glycemic index. Are you familiar with the glycemic index of foods? That's how quickly the glucose in the food is released into the blood. Let me give you your baseline is 55. So anything under 55 glycemic index is considered low. So your cherries are about 26, grapefruit, that sits at about 25. So people with diabetes, they're good fruits because they're low GI, slow release of glucose. Sugar. Where does sugar sit? Whether it's white or brown or tan or dark brown, it's 59. Now that's not a surprise. Now your white bread, white cereals, so let's say the white wheat, the refined wheat, it sits at 69. Do you know what that means? A slice of white bread will get the blood sugar level up higher than a lolly. Why? It's because of the amylopectin A. Remember that type of starch that was created in the intensive crossbreeding? I'm glad you're sitting down because the next piece of information is shocking. Wholemeal. Wholemeal wheat, 72. How could that be? Well, because it's not refined, it has more amylopectin A in it. Can you see that? Do you know what that means? That wholemeal bread on your glycemic index is even worse than white. Now, please don't quote me as saying Barbara says white bread's better than brown, okay? Please. Regarding the gut, the wholemeal's better because you got the fibre, you got more B vitamins, but regarding the starch, when I presented this at one of our health retreats, a lady began to cry. I said, "Why are you crying?" She said, "I'm a diabetic. I'm type 2 diabetes. I was diagnosed at 65. I'm now 69. I do everything they tell me. I have wholemeal bread, wholemeal pasta. I have wholemeal cereal. And every 6 months I go to the doctor and he puts me on more insulin. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results." She said, "I'm crying tears of joy because you have just solved the puzzle. And I'm crying tears of frustration because I don't do what the lady down the road does. She has chocolates and lollies and pizza and cheesecakes. I don't do that." What's every diabetic told to eat? Whole grain bread, whole grain cereal. Why? Why? What does Australia grow a lot of? Wheat. So what are they going to tell you? Eat wheat. And so this is explaining that this is not an epidemic, this is a pandemic. Do you know what it said on the news 2 weeks ago? Every 4 minutes in Australia, another diabetic is diagnosed. That's crazy. And if you look at that time frame, by the 1990s, all the wheat we're eating is hybridized. So we're looking at one of the first 2 things you've got to stop to conquer diabetes, and that is the refined sugar and the hybridized wheat. So what do you eat? Spelt and kamut, they have not been hybridized, so they don't contain that amylopectin I. So there are some things that you've got to stop to control diabetes. And these 2 head the list, plus caffeine. Caffeine gets an insulin response. One of the reasons why some diabetic nurses aren't advising that, because what are they drinking themselves? Dairy. See, today the milk is altered. Today the cows are given, do you know 80% of the antibiotics that are made go to animals? But what happens with the dairy when it breaks down in the gut, and the current figures, this was in the newspaper, that 60% of Australians cannot handle dairy. Now if we change that to organic raw milk, it'd bring it down to probably 30%. They can't break down those large globules in their gut. And so what's happening is molecules are getting into the blood that shouldn't be in there. Let's say the molecules that are broken down from the dairy look like that. So what happens now? The body creates antibodies. Let's say this is an antibody to actually wipe that out. So they wipe out the antibodies, and then they look across, and the beta cells in the pancreas have a similar structure. So these antibodies that were created to wipe out those molecules broken down from the dairy, they come over and start wiping out the beta cells in the pancreas. And it is in that way that the dairy is contributing to the diabetes. How many people in Australia wake up to those 4? Isn't it true that many do? Not realising the danger. Many are sick through ignorance. So to conquer diabetes, these 4 things have to stop. As we conclude this session, I hope the insights shared today empower you to take an active role in your health journey. Remember, holistic healing encompasses not just the body, but also the mind and spirit. Embrace the knowledge you've gained today and apply it in your daily life. Prioritise nutrition, lifestyle choices, and natural remedies to enhance your overall well-being. Together we can unlock the secrets to a healthier life. Thank you for joining me, Barbara O'Neill. Be sure to subscribe for more lectures on holistic health and wellness, and don't forget to take care of yourselves.